G'day, Dons fans, and welcome back to Don the Stat. Well, if you thought 2026 couldn't find another way to hurt us, last Sunday night certainly tested that theory. A 30-point loss to West Coast in trying conditions under interim coach Dean Solomon, and while expecting wholesale change after only a few days would have been unrealistic, there are at least a few signs that some different ideas were being explored. This week, even those that are more inclined to look at draft position over win-loss have their grand final. This week it's Carlton. Sunday night, the MCG under lights, a must-win. It doesn't matter where either club sits on the ladder. It doesn't matter how many games you've won. It doesn't matter who's coaching or who's playing. Essendon versus Carlton still means something. So tonight we'll look back at what happened against West Coast, discuss the fallout from another difficult week at Tullamarine, examine the AFL assistance request, preview the challenge the Blues present, and ask whether Dean Solomon can spark something different in his second week of coaching. I'm Jonathan Walsh, and joining me as always is my co-host Ian Hume. Humey, I don't think either fan base is particularly happy with where they sit right now, but regardless of ladder position, these two teams always throw up a pretty interesting challenge and get the juices flowing. How are you feeling about heading into this one?
Hey there, Jono. Look, I'm a little bit distracted. I'm recording in the cold depths of my garage, and unfortunately I haven't got my Fight MND beanie yet for this year, so it's given me an excuse to wear my Cricket Victoria beanie. And if my dreams do come true and the merged Melbourne Big Bash teams end up being called the Bushrangers, then I will be departing Don the Stat to start a new podcast focused solely on 90s domestic cricket nostalgia. But look, until that happens, you're stuck with me here. And as always, I've got past the disappointment of a loss and once again excited to see how things play out against that mob on Sunday night. How are you, mate?
Yeah, as you know, always really excited to see us play against the mob from Princess Park, whose name we typically don't mention, and it just dawned on me that I used their name a few times in the intro. But
that's a few $1,000 fine into the end of season trip, Kitty, isn't it?
It is, yeah. But no, I'm going well, mate. Like you, moved on pretty quickly from the result on Sunday. I think that, whilst it would have been great to get over there and have a win, I think given the week that we had and just the number of players that we had out against a team that probably was only Jack Graham away from being full strength, it was always going to be a really hard ask. And I thought there were some bits of the game that were good, some bits of the game that weren't so good, but that was to be expected given everything that had gone on, mate. So, moved on from that one pretty quickly, stuck into work all week and now really looking forward to I called Dean Solomon's press conference today actually, and that certainly sparked the excitement in me again. I'm really looking forward to getting to the G on Sunday.
Absolutely. Well, look, before we get into reviewing the West Coast game, we'll just give you a bit of an update on what's happening because we are coming up to Essendon's bye round, but that's certainly not going to stop us here at Don the Stat. On Monday night, so King's birthday, or the evening of King's birthday, Rick Edwards will be joining me to talk about the draft prospects as we head into the national champ. So we're really going to start to see that prospective draft order settle itself after the high-end stuff for the under-18s. On Tuesday, Jono and I will be hosting our annual mid-season Patreon Q&A. The patrons can ask us questions directly. So it is a great time to sign up to the Patreon to get involved in that. And that recording will be released publicly on Thursday. And then next Sunday, I'll be having a discussion with Tommy Wolf from Reading the Play about list builds, where Essendon's at and where to from here. And just to the side, we're also putting together a new range of stubby holders, Don the Stat stubby holders. The last couple of runs we've done over the previous year have been pretty popular. So if you are interested in getting a new design, please fill in the Google form on the Patreon or in the description for this episode if you are interested in getting one.
Yeah, certainly never a dull moment, mate. I'll be flying out to Europe for work on Thursday next week, so looking forward to that, but also looking forward to listening to your interview with Tommy. Whilst I'm over in the Northern Hemisphere and getting away from all things AFL and AFL media, which will be a nice little break from it all. But should we rip the Band-Aid off, as we say, mate, and jump straight into reviewing the Eagles game?
Yeah, let's do it. And I think, as much as the result was disappointing, I think given that you've got a new head coach and, a real stripping back of what we're looking to do, I think the most pressing thing to consider at the start of this game is what you notice about what had changed for the Bombers with the new head coach. It is hard to change much in only a couple of days. I think they had one training session before they flew out with Dean Solomon as head coach, but there were a couple of positional changes, and Mackay to forward ruck was the obvious one here. But did you notice anything else from the way in which we lined up under Solomon that we hadn't done under Brad Scott.
Yeah, that was the main positional change, wasn't it? And that was quite a new one. I think Ben kicked his first goal for us as well, which was a nice little reward for him. And I thought he played a decent game, both as a forward and as a backup ruckman. It also meant that we settled Blackiston down back rather than him having to rotate between backline and ruck. That's not brand new for Blackiston, but not something he'd done I don't think he played as a pure defender this year. He certainly did last year. And then Roby got some big responsibility in the midfield. We got our wish from the preview of seeing him and Harley go head-to-head for a fair bit of the game, which was, pretty enthralling battle. And if we think of where Harley's at now in the consistency in his game, year 3, and where Sully is in year 1 without really having a pre-season, it's pretty exciting about where our bloke might get to. Langford played back. We've seen that at different times, but again, he was a bit more settled down there. It's hard to tell watching on the tally, but it looked to me that there were 2 areas of real focus. And one was the contest, which I thought was good in parts of the game and poor in others. And then we looked a bit more committed to a zonal defence, with our defenders also being a bit more proactive and committed to coming forward at the footy to disrupt, rather than waiting and sort of retreating and having to defend one-on-one. Teams move the ball from defensive 50 to forward 50 30.6% of the time this season, which is 18th in the comp and poor. We know that. Interestingly, Brisbane, the reigning premiers, are 17th at 28.7, and Melbourne, who everyone's up and about for good reason, is 16th at 26.9, but obviously that's still a fair gap from us and where we're at 18th. The AFL average is 23.7, so Melbourne are closer to the AFL average in 16th position than they are to us in 18th. The Swans are ranked number 1. Teams move the footy from D50 to forward 50 just 18.4% of the time against them. We restricted West Coast to coast ball movement just 18.2% of the time. So that's better than what Sydney have done over the course of this season, and a huge improvement. But I think we should probably caveat on a couple of things. West Coast are the 17th ranked team in the AFL for moving the ball from coast to coast at 18.8% of the time. So I guess we held them slightly better than their season average. The conditions weren't conducive to ball movement, particularly for half the game when West Coast were kicking into the wind. And then West Coast did still score 15.2% of the time. They did transition from defensive 50. The AFL average is 9.2 this season. They averaged 9.2 this season. The AFL average is 10.5. GWS are ranked number 1 at 12.8. So 15.2 is still way too high. So we did a better job at limiting transition, but when they did transition, they scored more than we would like to have seen happen.
Yeah. And you mentioned before that there was a real focus on contests, and in particular around the clearance, we had a distinct advantage, at least in terms of wins. So we were up 4 in terms of centre clearance differential and 18 at stoppage clearance, which is obviously quite high. But as has happened many times before, we couldn't turn that into direct scores. So we didn't, despite having those direct centre clearances, or that centre clearance advantage, we didn't score at all from centre clearance, whereas the Eagles managed 7 points. Stoppage clearance was a bit better with 25 to 19, but for that level of dominance that we had, you would hope for a bigger scoreboard advantage. And then at the next level, you would hope that clearance wins would turn into territory where you could win the ball back in dangerous positions in the ground. But, for all the territory we got from winning clearance, we weren't able to win it back off the Eagles when they were exiting our back half. So we only had 16 forward half intercepts for the game, which is down on our season average of 19.4, which is already the second lowest in the competition. So whilst it's pleasing to do so well at clearance, we didn't actually accomplish anything substantial from that dominance in the context of the game.
No, we didn't. I mean, it was clearly a focus, and it should have been. And it was a focus, to be fair, under Brad Scott as well. He spoke about clearance a lot contest a lot more so than clearance. You and I have been speaking about contest and balance at contest, for, as long as we've been doing the podcast, really. And, we're now to the point where people are using bees to the honeypot as vernacular in Essendon related chat. So it's no surprise. And I was really pleased to hear Solly talk about contest balance. And actually, if you want a really good example of what that looks like, there was a piece of play I'm going to say it was the second quarter, but I might have got my quarters mixed up. But it was certainly when we were kicking with the wind. And the ball came out to Kondo Giardis and sort of was bouncing away from him. And Sardal Hooley had a decision to make, and that was to either come up and go and be a bee in the honeypot and go at the same footy, or hold his position and sit out. And I think when people hear contest and contested possession, they think about being hard and tough and throwing your body on the line. It's not only about that. A contested possession is basically just when the ball is in dispute and both teams have numbers in and around the footy and are a chance of winning, as opposed to a pure loose ball get where the ball's not in dispute, or a gather. So yeah, contested possession, shootout can be a loose ball get or a hard ball get. It just means that the ball's in dispute and neither team has clear possession. But in this example, Sardal Hooley held his position and sat back. That his West Coast opponent actually went halfway to the contest, halfway back. Kondo did a really good job running onto the footy and gathered it. And it meant that we had that balance on the outside, being Sardal Hooley, who didn't overcommit. He was able to get used and we went forward and got a shot at the goal. So yeah, if you go back and watch that piece, I'm pretty sure it was in the second quarter. It's a good example, I think, of what Dean Solomon and other coaches talk about when they talk about that contest balance. It's not just about what happens around clearance. It's contest all around the ground when the ball's in dispute. But you're right. Just to go back to your point, mate, we won clearance by 22, which is a smashing, but only had 43% of the game in our forward half. So it was a real lost opportunity. We won pre-clearance contested possession by 28. So that's a great result. At centre bounces, throw-ins, ball-ups, we won the ball 28 more times than they did, so big tick there. But we lost post-clearance contest. So once the ball gets on the outside and is in dispute, we lost that by 26. And I think actually a lot of that was personnel. Our midfield, due to what we had available, was quite one-dimensional. Roby was the number one player on the ground for contested possession, Parish 5th, Sardis 8th. Roby, Setterfield and Parish, though, between them, or each had just one post-clearance contested possession. Sardis had 3. So they're not really transitioning and getting around the ground. We didn't have a lot of speed on the half-forward line to come up and be part of that solution either. And Kyle Langford, who wins post-clearance contested possession really just through football IQ and positioning, was our only player in the top 6 on the ground for post-clearance contested possession. So, yeah, our clearance quality was quite low. And then we got outnumbered and outworked at contests around the ground.
Yeah. I think we've spoken about this quite a lot on this show, how we're not bad for the entirety of games. It's just patches. There's patches of the games where things really fell away. And it was clear in that game. It was the back end of the second quarter through halfway in the third where everything fell apart. And Solomon sort of spoke about that in his post-game press conference as well, as that being the real difference between the two sides. So the Eagles kicked 8 goals straight from either side of the main break, and we couldn't even register a score of our own in that time, and that included the last 3 goals of the second quarter, which was against the Breeze, which has been up to that point really difficult to find a score. And as you say, it really all came down to contests. And during that period of the game, the Eagles were up 15 in contested possession. If you took that out for the remainder of the game outside that period, we actually beat them in the contest by 17. So it's, as I said, it's that contest loss meant that we couldn't get any meaningful territory and lock it in. During that entire period, we only generated 1 forward half turnover, whereas the Eagles had 8. It's just another example in a long list from this season where we've collapsed in a critical aspect of the game, and the opposition has made us pay on the scoreboard.
Yeah, it's the tail of the tape, isn't it? We defended really well in the first quarter to prevent damage when they had momentum kicking with the wind. We held field position for a lot of the first half of the second quarter, but couldn't put score on the board. Jackson Pryor kicks a behind sort of halfway through the second quarter to bring the margin within a point. They then get a goal from the kick-in to take it back out to 7 points. They then get a behind and therefore territory from the centre bounce. And we basically went to sleep from there and just got dominated in all facets of the game, really. But most of it started in and around contest and getting beaten up around the footy. And then they were able to control the ball on the outside. They took 26 uncontested marks to 15 in that period of the game. Ground ball gets, they were +5 contested possession. They were +16. So it was, just that one lapse of the game where, again, we didn't maximise the opportunity we had at the start of the first quarter to really put some scoreboard pressure on. And then once we fell asleep and our heads dropped, they did some real damage in a pretty short space of time.
Yeah, indeed. And I think the other thing that hurt us was a lack of discipline. I think there's a fine line between being tough and being over the top. And I think part of it was a little bit over the top, but also part of it was we were getting sucked into what the Eagles were trying to do. I think they were trying to bait us a little bit with the way in which they were going at us, and we responded. Unfortunately, we had some pretty questionable free kicks paid against us, which doesn't help with momentum. But we need to be better than that in the future, in not sort of letting ourselves be, tempted or brought, tricked into doing those sort of actions that really, really cost the teams at really difficult times. Obviously, the start of the second half, we gave away a pretty nothing free kick. You could argue whether it should have been called, but we gave the umpire the opportunity to call it, and they did, and they scored a goal from that before we even had a chance to respond after the end of the second quarter. So it's just one of those things which I think can happen when you're a team that things aren't going your way. It's really easy to get frustrated. And I think teams that we've been coming up against in the last couple of weeks have really played on that frustration we have and been able to take advantage from it.
Yeah, no, you're right. It feels like when things aren't going your way, all things really compound, don't they? So whether it's free kicks or injuries, Archie May going down so early in the game, it's been a real problem and compounded in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. I guess to try and turn to some more positives from the game, one thing I really liked was that a couple of times on the night, we tried something different from kick out. We went really aggressive and actually caught the Eagles napping a couple of times. You can't pull those moves all the time in game. Teams are pretty good at working out set plays from oppositions if they start doing it so well, particularly from something like a kick in, where it's one of the only times in the game where we can really sort of plan for a particular situation. But it's not something I felt we've done it a lot over the past couple of years, being really rigid with the way in which we approach kick-out. So it was good to see some small change from our usual approach.
Yeah, it was. We saw Jacob Farrow take a couple of kick-ins too, and not just from kick-ins, but he started to take on a little bit more by foot, which is definitely something he's capable of. And one of the reasons that we drafted him was his ability to break lines essentially by foot, which was really nice to see. It was his biggest metres gained game since the Suns game in round 6, and he only had the 9 kicks. So he was doing a lot of that damage through, real kick or penetration by foot. So, yeah, let's hope that that's something that we've started to unlock in his game and we see it a little bit more regularly, because we haven't really had that in our side. We get it from Archie Roberts through, kept taking the game on through leg speed and run, and Sardell Hooley gives us a little bit of that as well. But we don't have that real penetrating, 40, 50, 60 metre kicker down back, and Jacob's got that ability, and we started to see a little bit of it against the Eagles.
Yeah, he had a couple of nice moments of composure as well, where he just sort of he took his time, worked his way through some Eagles players challenging him, and again, was able to deliver by foot there. I think the other thing I really like coming out of the game was the progression of Nick Bryan as a main ruckman. I think you and I, over the past couple of years, have been a bit sceptical about how he progressed leading it to the knee injury, and whether he could be a number one option at AFL level. I think over the past couple of years, both you and I have sent him packing from the club as trade bait. Obviously, we let Sam Draper go as a free agent. We had to let him go. He was an unrestricted free agent. But I think even coming into this year, we were a bit concerned about what he had displayed up to that point, whether he had the capability to be number one ruck at AFL level. But, I think my fears or my concerns about that are being really put to bed over these past couple of weeks. He's come back into the side and had a real impact. He's certainly not dominating games by any stretch, but I think the pleasing thing is he has not been dominated. So we went into a game against a ruckman in Bailey Williams, who's been one of the form players in the competition. And Williams, really didn't have a whole lot of an impact. Again, probably got a 50-50 free kick that saw him kick a goal, but that was really his only direct impact I felt on the game. If you look at since he's come back into the side, of all the centre bounces he's attended, we've won 53% of those, which is above Peter Wright's 45% and Lachlan Blackerson's 36%. So he's certainly having an impact, and I think, it's a nice little tick for the side going forward. But I think from what we've seen from Nick Bryan, we can really rely on him as a number one ruck going forward.
Yeah, he's building nicely, and I think the bit that I've liked in his game that has surprised me and improved a lot further than I might have thought was his follow-up work, particularly in and around contest and supporting our mids. I think we'd already seen his ability with his ruck craft and even being able to be a bit of a link-up player around the ground. I think those signs were there once he had an AFL-ready body, but his contest work around the ground and when the ball is on the ground has really impressed me. Williams didn't have anywhere near the impact he's been having recently. It's not Nick's fault, but actually not, despite the hit-out dominance, not a single one of his hit-outs led to a score, which, that's not on him. the AFL average for hit out to first possession is 46.7%. So, you're actually less likely to get first possession at a clearance or a stoppage if your team wins the hit out than if you don't, which is kind of weird. But it probably does show a little bit that hit outs are kind of a bit overrated, I think. But GWS rank number one in the AFL. 50.8% of the time they win a hit out, they get first possession. We went at 52.9% on Sunday night, which is really impressive. 76.9% of our first possessions resulted in a clearance, which would have you ranked sixth in the AFL if you did that across the season. Incidentally, we are ranked sixth, but that's slightly better than our season average. We just didn't have the right spread of mids, I don't think, that could carry the ball forward from those clearance wins, and as a result gave a lot of them straight back to the opposition. A lot of them were short, low percentage kicks out of the clearance rather than, run and spread, link up and be able to hit presenting forward. So, not Nick's fault at all, but unfortunately for all the good he did, we didn't get the team benefit from it.
No, unfortunately. Well, look, moving on from the Eagles game and into another Barrett Award nomination, I found it difficult to actually think of a outstanding nomination because there was just so many people putting their hand up. So as the great leader of this show that I am, I bravely passed off the decision this week to you. So, Jono, your Barrett Award nomination for this week, who's got the chocolates?
Yeah, thank you, mate. I feel like you've done a number on me here. Lots of nominations this week, which isn't surprising at all. I mean, we get a lot of nominations from the good folk that listen to us every week, but we have multiple nominations for Tom Morris. John Ralph got a nomination. Nick Revolt, Damien Barrett himself got nominated a couple of times. Daisy Thomas, Eddie Maguire, Phil Davis, Nat Edwards, even James Hurd got a nomination. So there was a lot to choose for, but I'm actually going to stick up for one of our own. I think it's about time we, as Essendon folk, we all rally behind one another and stick together. And I don't think we see nearly enough media representatives hold their own accountable, and to see Matthew Lloyd call out Tom Morris and Kane Cornes essentially for lying this week about his role in working behind the scenes to position James Hurd as our next coach was really refreshing. So I'm going to stick up for Lloydie here and give a double nomination this week because it came from the one piece, and that's to Tom Morris and Kane Cornes. Hopefully you can find room on the trophy, mate, for both of their names side by side.
Yeah, well, we'll have to. It's going to have to start putting a bit more money into this trophy. We might just be all the media win it, and we have to put all their names on it. I don't know how big a trophy we can afford on the Donostat budget, but I think we'll find a way to do it. Great nomination there, Jono. Look, moving on with some of the news. The day after we recorded, Essendon news never stops. We learnt that two members of our football staff had quite suddenly departed, with midfield coach Ben Jacobs and club psych Ben Robbins quitting their positions following the sacking of Brad Scott, which has left us really short-handed for the rest of the year. Both were close with Brad, and I can understand their loyalty to him. And, maybe it's a bit hypocritical that we're expecting more of people at the club when the club didn't necessarily show Brad the loyalty of him seeing out his contract, but it also says a lot about how they feel for the players that were their responsibility, leaving them in the lurch in what has already been a difficult season. So I'm not sure how it reflects all that well on them as individuals making that decision. I think given some of the news from this week, a club psych would have been pretty handy to have on hand.
Yeah, I'm normally pretty level-headed and balanced, mate, as you know, but I was pretty upset by this one and disappointed. I think if there was one thing that Brad Scott was really strong on during his time as coach, it was that he would make decisions in the best interests of the club. Now, people can disagree or not with the decisions that he made, and that, to a large extent, that's the world that we live in. People see things differently, and it's one of the great things about our sport. But I do think that there are a lot of decisions made about our list and otherwise that were, contradictory to Brad Scott being able to win more games of footy as coach. And ultimately, in the best interests of the bigger picture of this club. And that's not what these two have decided to do. There's only 3 months left of this season, really. And I would have thought the players and their well-being might have been prioritised here. And yeah, it's really disappointing that they'd walk out. And I think your point about having a club psych. I mean, that role is meant to be independent of the coaches. I know that Ben and Brad had a working relationship prior to Essendon, but he should be a person that players could have gone to and trusted and felt like they could speak openly. And at times that would be about Brad Scott. So I think that would have left players feeling, really disappointed, really let down, probably, short on support, both from a football perspective, but also a well-being perspective. So yeah, really, really disappointing that they would make those decisions. But yeah, let's hope we can move on now without them and find people that are more committed to the cause.
Yeah, indeed. And speaking of committed to the cause, it was good to see in Rick Edwards' training report that he put out on his Patreon this week that Xavier O'Neill had actually stepped from the VFL to support the players through sort of acting as a coach at training. So I think some of those VFL players who've been here for a while, like Xavier, and I think Jackson Haley as well as another one that have become really good club people, and it shows that you can be a really good club person without being on the senior list. So well done to him for stepping up there. It was also interesting to see that it was reported that all of Brad Scott's payout from his contract is actually going to fit under the soft cap for this year, which I think, thinking ahead, we probably would have been concerned about our ability to fully staff a football department next year. But given that news, it does sort of give us a little bit of a clean slate heading into 2027. We can approach the best people that we can, because we should have the finances to be able to do it.
Yeah, interesting. When Andrew Welsh and Tim Robbins gave their press conference after the announcement of Brad Scott being dismissed, that it was asked about the soft cap impact, and Tim Robbins mentioned that there would be an impact into next year, but they were confident that they could manage it. So it's nice that we've been able to find a way to do that this year and have a clean slate next year. I don't know whether maybe the two people leaving did us a little bit of a favour. I'm assuming here that probably shouldn't, but normally when people resign and leave of their own decision or own accord, that they're not paid out for the remainder of their contract. So maybe that's helped us to move some funds forward into this year and get a clean slate next year. I think that's really important to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think there are also some question marks around, given where we were at, why we weren't spending the full amount of the soft cap that meant we could bring forward Brad's payment. But I guess it really sort of flows on from the Gia effect of him leaving. And I think given we had planned a bigger role for him into this season, we probably were putting aside a bit more money for his role. And with him leaving, we haven't had to spend all that money to satisfy him. Obviously, we did bring in Dean Solomon, but it probably left some extra money in the soft cap from that flow-on decision that has meant that we've been able to deal with Brad's payout in that manner.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a little bit of good news, I guess, in all the doom and gloom.
Yeah. Speaking of the doom and gloom and what probably a side could have been useful for, we did have some more devastating injuries this week. First, Archie May dislocating his shoulder running back with the fly of the ball. It looked like a really bad one at the time. It certainly didn't go straight back in. And it does seem like they're still weighing up whether to rehab it and have him back in a month or send him in for surgery and have him out for the rest of the year. So it's just another one of those frustrations, given that he was one of the shining lights so far this season and was really growing at the level where he was a regular contributor and goal kicker in a team that was really struggling to score.
Yeah, those impact injuries are really starting to add up, aren't they? I mean, there's not a lot you can do about it. It's an unfortunate part of footy, but again, when things aren't going your way, they seem to find a way to pile up. We've had, just in recent weeks, Dyson Sharp, Andy McGrath, Jai Caldwell, Peter Wright, Zach Johnson, now Archie May, all out from collisions. Of course, Sam Durham missed last week as well with concussion. So yeah, it's a bit like salt being rubbed into the wounds. And in this case, we also just get robbed of that benefit of Caddy and May and Edwards, continuing to build continuity together. And we want to get games into these young blokes. It's really, really frustrating when anyone gets injured. But for us in a year where we're trying to develop these young guys, to have them out too is really, really frustrating.
Yes, and then we probably all, as fans, reached our lowest ebb this season with the news that Lewis Hayes had redone his ACL in his comeback game in the VFL. It's just, I guess, how unlucky can you get? That's the second re-aggravated ACL that we've had in the past 12 months, first with Nick Martin and now with Lewis Hayes. But fortunately for Lewis, as it was revealed today, it seems like it's just a re-aggravation, not a tear. It does mean he'll be out for the rest of this season, but they're planning for him to be right to go for 2027 pre-season. So it's a bit of good news in what has otherwise been a torrid 14 months for Lewis, but fingers crossed he's going to be able to get some continuity into 2027. I think when we first heard the news, we probably wouldn't have been expecting him back at least until this time next year, at least with the current diagnosis. Fingers crossed, he should be right to go for round one next season. And if he continues sort of on the trajectory that we saw leading into his first ACL, it's a really good chance that he starts in the senior side in round one.
Yeah, I guess you take the positive out of it and that he'll be ready to go for pre-season and it won't wipe him out for half of next year. And I guess the shame still is that, there was an opportunity for him to play, 5, 6, 7 games at senior level this year and I guess get to the end of the season with the discussion around Jordan Ridley and his future. You could make a more qualified decision on what we do there had we been able to see more of Lewis at AFL level this year. Yeah, so shame for him, shame from a list management perspective as well. But I guess we just bank the win that he'll be fit for day one of pre-season. He can complete a pre-season and be good to go for the first game next year.
Yeah. And then speaking of list management, Cal Toomey revealed on Tuesday night that indicating that the club has started the process of applying for AFL assistance due to its performance over the past couple of seasons. I certainly think it's something that's been bubbling away for some time, given the club's premiership and finals win drought. And I think we've sort of touched on it a few times, talking about whether we should be applying for this sort of assistance. But it's clear that it's out in the open now and the club is striving for it. It certainly spurred some debate as to whether we actually deserve it, given compared to clubs like North and West Coast, when they received assistance, our win-loss profile over a 4-year period is not as bad as those teams. But also, arguably, the AFL waited too long to step in with those sides. Also, given there's a good chance we'll be down the bottom of the ladder next year, there's a case that it's better for the AFL to preemptively give us assistance rather than giving it when Tasmania is going to pillage the young talent in 2027. So I guess, I think I know what you're going to say, but what's your position on Essendon asking for assistance at this stage? And do you think we're likely to get it?
I think I was thinking about this today. It's a bit like the finishing last conundrum. You hate that it's happening. You hate that it's going to happen and that is there forever and a day. But you also know that there's upside to it and it's for the long-term betterment of your football club and you just have to do it. So I think, I don't like that we have to do it or that we're in the position where we need to do it. But I think that given that mechanism is there, it's been available for other clubs. I'm glad that we are going through the process to ask the question. You're right in regards to win-loss profile over recent years, but West Coast played finals in 2020, won a final in 2019, won a flag in 2018. We last played finals in 2011. So the time span between finals and the request for assistance between us and West Coast is exactly the same. And of course, West Coast have had more, finals and premiership success in recent history than we have. So I think the AFL alleges they have a formula to work this stuff out. I think it's largely by discretion. I think our case is a pretty solid one. And I think more so with Tasmania coming in. And one thing that West Coast lent really heavily on in their submission was the fact that the draft in recent years was compromised and they didn't have access to talent at the top end of the draft like they otherwise would have because of father-son and academy bids. We've been drafting in the same talent pool and we had the benefit of being able to get Isaac Kako, but, we still had a compromised draft position last year and a couple of years ago when we had that early pick to get Elijah Sardis.
Yeah, and we're going to be going into a draft where there's a really good chance that the top two talents in the pool are going to be club tied in Cochrane and Walker for the Blues. So, you finish last and you're not going to be able to get the best kid in the country potentially. Obviously, they've got that compensation in there now with the end of first round pick if a bid comes in that first 5 picks, but it still makes it hard to rebuild if you're the worst side in the competition, you're not getting access to the best players. I guess if we did receive assistance, what do you think it's going to look like? I'm sure we're not going to get a pick straight after our first pick. It's probably going to be more along the lines of extra rookie spots, or a la West Coast. They might not even give us an extra end of first round draft pick, given that the mechanism is now in place for the compensation if a player is bid on high up the draft order.
Yeah, I would hope that that mechanism being put in place doesn't change the assistance if we are granted assistance, because there there should be two separate things. The assistance package should be given as a benefit to compensate for what's happened in years past where we haven't had access to top end talent because of other things that have happened in the draft. Yeah, West Coast got both of those, I would hope. And then they'll also get the benefit of that new mechanism this year if they finish in the bottom five. So I still think we should be asking for that end of first round pick and those extra rookie spots. So if we look at what West Coast were able to do with theirs, they traded that end of first round pick, which ended up being used to bring Brandon Starcevic to the club. He hasn't really been able to get onto the field, but they were able to get a premiership player from another club, a mature body, into their list. They got 4 additional rookie list spots for the 2026, 2027, 2028 season. It was through that they had a spot to add Milan Murdoch to their rookie list, who played well against us on Sunday and has been a really good find for them. They used their other ones to bring some senior bodies in as well from effectively listed free agents, but as SSPs to fill some roles. The only caveat in that package was the AFL reserves the right to alter or remove those additional rookie spots in 2027 and 2028. I guess they'd only do that if they saw West Coast springboarding up the ladder. So yeah, I'd be hoping that we ask for and receive the same assistance, because I think we can do a lot with both. Having what at this moment looks like a best case or worst, depending on how you view it, pick either 1, 2, or 3 in the draft. That will allow us to then get a additional pick at the start of the second round. If we were able to get another pick at the end of the first round, that would give us 3 picks inside the first sort of 20 odd. Plus our natural second round pick would give us 4 in the top 25. And that would give us options to bundle some picks up, move forward in the draft, potentially take a couple of picks in the top 10, or just take 4 players in the top 25 to bring in some additional talent. And then with the extra rookie spots, we've seen Matt Rosa be able to find some diamonds in the rough already. So I'd really like his chances of being able to bring in some talent that can really help us move forward in those roles as well, or if we were granted those. And we should be, because it doesn't make any sense to me that a team that's got such a young list and has to pay 95% of its salary cap has to do that to the same number of players as every other club. Let us have a few extra players on our list, speed up at the development, and see if we can find a few gems.
Yes, hopefully. Well, let's get on to our game against the other mob. And just as an aside, I was thinking earlier this year how, in decades past, we'd play this mob, sort of in the first 4 or 5 rounds of the season, and it'd be a really exciting game because the season was young and teams sort of both still had hope. I think as good as it is to sort of have a set time and sort of a marquee time slot in the King's Birthday Eve game, it has meant that our first game against Carlton is always sort of in the middle of the season. And I think we've lost something not having those early games against Carlton. I still remember, I think it was the 2009 game where we played them in round 3 and they were all up and about and we managed to get on top of them and get a really famous win there. So I think we just, as good as it is to have King's Birthday, I think we've lost something a little bit there by not being able to play Carlton early in the year.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was always, often that sort of double wasn't there, a game against Carlton leading into a Collingwood game or thereabouts. And footy just felt different when you had those big rivalries early in the year. I guess the one that has changed is the Hawthorn game. They were sort of in the wilderness for a while, and we've got that earlier in the year. So I guess we've swapped one for the other. But I do think that as much as I like to see Carlton down the bottom of the ladder, I think I only enjoy it so much because we've been down there too, and I've not wanted them to have something that we don't. I think if I think back to the periods and eras of footy that I've loved the most, it's when both of these teams are up near the ladder and we're beating them in games that really truly matter, whether that's big home and away clashes or big finals. So I certainly hope for our sake more than anything that's us sooner rather than later. But I imagine being able to beat this mob when we finally break that finals hoodoo. There'd be something pretty special about getting to the MCG and beating them in a final. And it being our first final win in some time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get on to them properly. And last season, Redacted finished in 11th position, had 9 wins and a percentage of 96.7. The Blues then started this season 1-8, only beating the Tigers before parting ways with their coach, Michael Voss. And that was the impetus for a 3-game winning streak. They've beaten the Dogs, Power and Cats in the last 3 weeks. That's left them currently sitting in 14th position with 4 wins and a percentage of 87.5%. And Carlton fans are starting to reassess their September plans.
They are. They're talking about wild card round, aren't they? Just quickly, mate, before we do move into it, are you reconsidering your choice of beanie given the colours that you've got on your head there?
I just want to make it clear, if you see on the video, Victoria. Just want to make that very clear. You can see the badge. Cool. It's Victoria. Unfortunately, they share colours with that mob.
Yeah,
I am wearing my new Essendon jumper.
It's a bit of a worry, mate.
So it's all good.
Okay.
I've got Nick Martin in the background. I think we're all
cleared that up. All right. We'll move on. Look, it's been well documented, mate, that and in fact came a bit of a meme, didn't it? That they were in winning positions at 3/4 time and into the last quarter, and a lot of their losses this season. Opening round, they were up at half time. They lost by 63 points. Round 3, they were up by 2 goals at 3/4 time, lost by 23. Round 4, up by 4 goals at 3/4 time, lost by 10. Round 6, up by 3 goals, lost by 5. So I guess what's changed is just their ability to finish the job. They already had parts of their game that were working really well and getting them into winning positions. They just didn't have the fortitude to finish the job off.
Yeah, indeed. And I think looking at the numbers for the Blues, it's really been their defence that's tightened up in these last 3 games. It's been the real difference because last year they ranked 14th for scores for, with 78. It's increased slightly to 81 this year, but in their wins and losses this year, that number is only has 1 point difference. So, in pretty much all their games, their scoring power has been the same. And the things that's really improved for them is they've been able to defend the ground more or ground better since Michael Voss departed. So they were conceding over 100 points per game with Michael Voss, whilst under their new coach, they're averaging 69 points a game. So they've really tightened up defensively there. Last year, the Blues were one of the best inside 50 sides. They averaged 4.7 more than their opponents per game in terms of inside 50s. That's actually dropped away this season to minus 3.4. What's flipped for them is actually been their efficiency once they've been going inside. So they were 45% forward efficiency last year. That's increased to 53% this year, and it's all the way up at 58% in their wins. They've also shifted to a much more handball style. They were going at 1.5 kicks to handball last year to 1.37 now. So there has been some, even before Michael Voss departed, there have been some shifts in what they were doing and what that meant for their gameplay. And it's only the last couple of weeks it's all sort of come together and seen them starting to rack up some wins.
Yeah, there's 2 areas of their game that have improved from a defensive aspect, and we'll talk about the second one in a moment. But in the last 3 weeks, they've conceded just 10, 3 and 9 points in those 3 games from defensive 50 chains. So they've been able to prevent and really stop teams going coast to coast and scoring against them. It was 38 and 19 points in the 2 weeks prior. So whilst they've had a slight reduction on being able to score from defensive 50 chains themselves under their new interim coach, that they've had a real improvement in preventing other teams from doing it against them.
Yeah. Moving on to their clearance profile. Last year, the Blues were one of the most dominant centre clearance teams, averaged 2.7 more centre clearances than their opponents. That's actually dropped away to minus 1.33 this year, although it is plus 1.75 in their wins. So when they've got on top at centre clearance, that's when they've been able to win games. Despite this drop, though, the Blues are actually still ranked second in scores from centre bounds, averaging 17.8 points per game. So when they're winning it, they're taking advantage of it. They're mid-table for stoppage differential, averaging 1.33 more than their opponents, but their scoring from this source depends on the type of stoppage. So they're ranked 16th from scores from ball ups with 8.6 per game, but 3rd from scores from throw-ins with 13.1. So the way in which they set up around a particular type of clearance really demonstrates how it shows their scoring profile. The Blues in both seasons remained a top contested ball team in both seasons. They ranked first this year for contested possessions with plus 7.9 and second in ground ball gets with plus 6.1. So they're, as has been their mantra or their profile for a while, they're a really strong contested team, and that plays out in the numbers.
Yeah, it does. Their clearance and contested game was their one wood and really their only wood under Michael Voss this year and arguably in prior years too. But they would concede as much as they scored. It was, almost a bit of a pattern of clearance and clearance score dominance in first half, first 3 quarters, and then they would drop off. Teams would get on top of them in that area, and then they concede really quickly. They're ranked second in the competition for post-clearance contested position differential and 3rd for ground ball differential. So, yeah, when the ball's in dispute and it's on the ground, they're a really strong team. One thing that has changed under Josh Fraser and they've dried up his scores against from centre bounce. They've conceded just 7, 2 and 7 points the last 3 weeks. If you go the 3 games before that, Michael Voss's last 3 games in charge, they conceded 31, 23 and 25 points in each of those games. And despite that reduction in scores against, they've been able to maintain their own potency going forward. They've averaged 21.3 points per game from centre bounce scores the last 3 weeks, which is up on their season average of 17.8 and ranked second in the competition.
Yeah. Finally, moving on to their aerial game. They've been a mid-table markings side. They're down slightly on their season with minus 1.25 per game. They've only averaged plus 5 in their wins. So it hasn't been a huge factor for them in terms of wanting to control the ball through the air. They've also been poor at taking marks inside 50 compared to their opponents this year. They're down minus 2.75 across their games this season. And actually in their wins, that's dropped even further to minus 4.25. So their wins, they're really relying on those ground ball wins in their forward line. They've been mid-table for their intercept differential with plus 1.08 per game. And they're actually ranked 17th in scores from intercept. They're averaging 36.6 points per game from this sort. It's one of the few areas where we've got a little bit of advantage in terms of our scoring profile is through intercept.
Yeah, they've reduced scores against on turnover under Josh Fraser again. Averaged 40.4 points a game under him in the last 3 weeks. That's down from 65.6 points against on turnover in the last 5 weeks against Michael Voss. But there's been no real noticeable change in their ability to score on turnover. Averaged 38.6 points per game the last 3 weeks, just 2 points a game better than their season average, which ranks them 17th in the AFL. So, yeah, they've been better defensively on turnover, that's for sure, the last few weeks. But, yeah, their scoring profile on turnover is the same as what it was under Michael Voss, and that has them second last in the comp. Given, trade week was pretty quiet last season, mate. There wasn't a lot of really big news, but I guess Carlton were probably the story of trade week, I guess. Do you want to talk us through what they did in the off-season?
Yeah, certainly. Well, they made significant changes over the off-season. They had 10 players departing from the side. Former captain Sam Doherty retired after 15 games last year. After that, 2-time Coleman medals winner Charlie Curnow departed for Sydney. He played 18 games last year, whilst Corey Durden also traded to Port Adelaide, having played 16 games. St Kilda's war chest shook both Tom De Koning and Jack Silvani free as free agents, having played 22 and 13 games respectively last season. Then they had 5 others who were delisted, including Horatio Fantasia, who played 6, Jackson Binns, who played 5, Alex Chincotto, who played 5, and Will White, who played 14. So they lost quite a significant chunk of the side that had run out there in 2025. But in order to get the Curnow trade across the line, Sydney had to send Will Hayward and Ollie Florent. And the pair have been really important pieces for Carlton so far this year. They've played 11 and 12 games respectively. They've also brought in Ben Ainsworth from the Gold Coast. He's gone on to play 12, whilst Campbell Chesser came from West Coast. He's played 3. Liam Reedy from Freo has also played 3. So they've been a bit more bit players than those first 3 players I spoke about. The Blues then matched a bid for father-son Harry Dean at pick 3. He's played 10 games so far this year. They then took Jack Ison and Taylor Byrne with picks in the 40s. They've played 3 and 7 games so far this year. And Wade Dirksen was taken as an SSP selection, and he's also played 3 games this season. So the players that they've brought in from other clubs and through the draft and trade process, they've made good use of. But obviously they have lost quite a lot of top-end talent from their side from last year, given who departed.
Yeah, they've got a really good one in Harry Dean, unfortunately. He was the Rising Star nomination this week. Their second of the year, Jagger Smith, was nominated back in round 2. Dean, that is playing beyond his years as a key defender, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing him play on Sunday. I'm not sure he'll get the Nate Caddy matchup, whether it'll be him or Wiedering, but yeah, if they do spend some time on each other, it'll be a bit of a preview of a battle that I'm sure we'll see for many years to come. So yeah, looking forward to that one. Jack Ison and Taylor Byrne were both been picked in the squad. I think they both play, both small forwards, although Ison is 190 centimetres and strong overhead. He's come through their academy. He's actually the first player to be drafted out of their academy. He's got real speed and X factor, and Byrne also has some tricks in his game. I remember Rick talking about him in his draft preview show with us. And then Dirksen's a key defender. He's been included in their squad. So they've been playing with just the 2 key defenders. They might look to bring a third one in this week, given that we've got some tall forwards.
Yeah, indeed. And I think that brings us to selection. And given again, we've got a Sunday game, that does mean extended bench and speculation, which is going to age like milk in about 24 hours, but Essendon have brought in Mason Redmond and Sam Durham, both coming back from 1 week injuries. And then Harrison Jones, Hussein Alashka, and Jaden Ewan have also been included in the extended squad, which they had been done last week before being left out of the final side. Out goes Archie with his shoulder injury, and then Darcy Parish has suffered knee soreness, and it looks like they're going to give him a couple of weeks break with the bye and hopefully get him ready again for those post-bye series of games. I think you probably would expect that it's a Redmond Durham in for Parish and May. Again, I think we'll howl to the moon about wanting to get a second small forward into the side, but it'd be hard to see how, from what they've selected, that they're going to do that given the way in which they've selected the side over the past few weeks.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later or in a moment, but there's a bit of a clue to what Carlton have been doing and Josh Fraser has changed that hopefully Dean Solomon might follow and give us a little bit of hope that we might see not just Alashka but Jaden Ewan into the team as well this week. So I hope there are a couple of additional changes. It'll be interesting to see with whether Kondo Giardis holds his spot with Redmond coming back or does Kondo stay, Redmond comes in and then Langford goes forward or to a wing. I do hope that we sacrifice a tall to get a couple of extra smalls into the team. There's Mackay, Kemp and McGovern forward for them. So do we go with 3 talls down back or play Redmond on the 190 centimetre McGovern? Cox could play as a second ruck if we did that. I think there's a lot of options. I'm probably going to turn myself into a pretzel trying to predict this one. So, I think let's just wait till tomorrow. In terms of Carlton, no outs for them. Zach Williams, Cooper Lord and Wade Dirksen back in the side. I expect that Williams will come in. Dirksen only if they feel the need to play that third tall. The conditions are going to be okay. So wouldn't surprise me if they do go that way.
Yeah, well, again, we'll just have to wait till 5 p.m. tomorrow night to find out for sure. But just as an aside, my brain thought about this earlier in the week after what we saw in the West Coast game, and we might have the situation where Ben and Harry Mackay ruck against each other, which I don't know if this is true, but it probably would be the first time ever that identical twins have rucked against each other in an AFL match. Obviously, brothers have rucked against each other. Famously, the Madden brothers would have rucked against each other plenty of times, but I'm not sure if there's any identical twins that have done the same. But it wouldn't be the first time that Essendon player has rucked against a twin, though, with Essendon AFLW player Stephanie Wales having rucked against her sister Lucy, who plays for the Hawks. So the woman would have got there first if that is the case. But it could be a first on Sunday night, and I'm sure people will be rushing around saying that they were there to see when identical twins rucked against each other.
Yeah, ChatGPT tells me it's never happened before, and as we know, AI is always right. So I think you might be onto something there, Humey. Most of the other twins I could find on record weren't rucks or tall players, so I think we might be, or you might be onto something there. But shout out to Matilda Stevens, who called out the Steph and Lucy Wales one in our Patreon chat. Yeah, credit to her on that one. It was a good pickup.
Absolutely. Well, look, moving on to Carlton's last game, they had a famous win against Geelong, 88-84. The Blues did fall behind by nearly 20 points by quarter time, and they sort of reversed what had been happening to them by pulling back an opposition's lead, and they actually got back in front just after half time. Then they managed to keep the lead for much of the rest of the game, falling behind on the second last goal of the game before Captain Cripps took a big mark and goal to seal the win.
Yeah, he's been back at his best, Paddy Cripps. He's had 10, 10 and 9 coaches' votes the last 3 weeks. He hasn't had a 10-vote game from the coaches since round 23, 2024, and only had 4 other 6+ vote games since then. So, yeah, most definitely at his dominant best.
Yeah. If you looked at the stats from the match, it was actually fairly even across most categories. But as you'd expect from what we spoke about earlier, Carlton dominated at clearance. They won 13 more, including 3 more centre clearances and 10 stoppage clearances. And they were particularly damaging from the centre bounce. They kicked 4 goals, won, whilst only conceding 7 points from the same source. So it was a big reason why they ended up in front at the end of the game.
Yeah, it was, mate. It was the difference in the game. Geelong had 5 more intercept marks, 8 more contested marks, and 6 more inside 50s, but 4-1 to 1-1 out of centre bounce. It was telling in the end and the difference in the game.
Yeah. Talked about him before, but Patrick Cripps was the leading disposal getter for Carlton. He had 30, and as did his partner in crime, Sam Walsh. The two of them shared 15 clearances and 14 score involvements between them, whilst Jagger Smith, favourite for the Rising Star, he had 27. Will Hayward kicked 3 goals, whilst Flynn Young and Brody Kempe each kicked 2.
Yeah, Flynn Young, Jack Ison and Taylor Byrne all kicked a goal each as well. Ben Ainsworth kicked 2 behinds. Ainsworth and Hayward have been in the side for the whole year. Ison debuted under Josh Fraser, played the last three weeks. Matt Flynn was a 2025 mid-season draftee. He debuted last year, but had been out of the side and came back in the last 2 weeks under Fraser, and then Byrne as well. Started in the team and then was dropped and has come back in under Fraser as well. So he's brought 3 small forwards into this side to complement the 2 sort of, I guess Ainsworth and Hayward are more those sort of high half forward, sort of turning back towards goal types, but to complement their tools and bring some pressure and ground level players to the side. We talked about their improvement in defending opposition transition. Well, I think a big part of that is because they've now got extra ground ball prowess and sort of leg speed through their forward 50 that really helps them to do that. So when I mentioned earlier, there's a bit of a clue as to what the Blues are doing that I hope Dean Solomon follows. That's it. That introduction of those 3 additional small forwards has made a big difference to Carlton's fortunes.
Yeah. Well, moving on to the match itself, and we've touched on it a couple of times, and just how good Carlton have been at centre clearance, particularly in scoring from second clearance. As we said, they're the second best team at scoring from second clearance, whilst this year we've been the second worst at stopping teams from scoring. So on paper, you would expect Carlton to really dominate in terms of scores from centre clearance and be a big scoring source for them. So sure, that is going to be a big focus for the coaches heading into the game. How can we at the very least nullify Carlton's scoring power from this source this week?
Yeah, the AFL average is 13.6 points per team per game. Carlton have averaged 17.8. Coming into the game last week, West Coast had scored 19, 16, 25 and 12 points from centre bounce. So they've been going pretty good in that area, had a couple of games where they were over the AFL average. We kept them to just 7. So we were pretty good in that area last week. We didn't get the benefit our way from winning as much centre clearance as we did, but we also restricted their ability from scoring. This week we go up against a midfield that's a lot more mature though. Pitney's been playing really good footy in the ruck. I think from a list management perspective, for them to lose TDK and not have to pay that huge amount of money that they were going to keep him, and then Pitney's had the opportunity to play instead. They've had a bit of a win there. Cripps, Walsh and Hewitt go through there as well, and the young Jagger Smith, and then Ainsworth at times as well provides a little bit of relief. They pushed Chera to the outside the last couple of weeks. So they've got some real mature bodies plus Jagger Smith running through there. Second for centre bounce scores, as you said. Third in the AFL at scoring from throw-ins, but 16th from ball-ups and 17th at scoring from turnover. Kick-ins, they're ever slightly above the AFL average, but neither here nor there. So I think it's just a defensive setup this week. Just take one area of strength away from them, and that's the centre bounce. Use Setterfield in his best role as that defensive mid. He's not going to be beaten for pace this week. It's one thing that they don't really have. They've got plenty of power, although Walsh and Smith are good runners. They don't have that real explosive speed in the centre bounce. So I don't think Setterfield should be exposed there. And then I think I'd be using Durham in a defensive position too. The thing I like about Sam Durham in that defensive setup at centre bounce is he's one that can turn defence into attack. So he's really good at reading the ball and then timing what he does. So, if we're in a position to win it, he'll go. If we're in a position where we need to defend, he'll dig in. So I'd be going with that setup this week, mate. They're 16th in the AFL at scoring from defensive 50, 15 at scoring from defensive centre. So I think if we can take away their ability to exit from the front of the stoppage and be prepared to scrap for territory ourselves, then I think we give ourselves a really good chance of setting up the ground and limiting their scoring.
Yeah. Another area we're going to have to focus on is building off that centre clearance work, but it's our contested work. And particularly post the clearance, we talked a lot about how we struggled against the Eagles in this aspect, and the Blues have been the best contested possession side in the competition. So is it simply a matter of being harder at the contest this week, or is there some more structural things we can do that will give us more of a chance here?
Yeah, I touched on this earlier. People I think hear contest and they think hardness, but it's not just about that. Contested and uncontested possession isn't necessarily about inside and outside. An uncontested possession is really just an uncontested mark or uncontested gather where your team's got the ball and you move it to a teammate, whereas a contested possession is where the ball is in dispute, and that can be a hard ball gather or a loose ball gather or a gather. So we'll wait and see what selection brings, but I hope we bring in some run and leg speed. Langford is the exception to the rule in what I'm about to say, but he does it through being able to read the play. Roberts, El Hooley and Kako are the other three in our top four this year, along with Langford, for post-clearance contested possession. Newen's fifth. So I do think we need to bite the bullet, play Newen and Al Ashkar, give us some extra capabilities in that part of the game. Durham will give us a bit of a lift in that area too. He's one of our mids that is better at getting from contest to contest. So I don't think it's a case of being harder. I think it's a case of adding run so that we can run harder, we can outnumber and we can outwork Carlton.
Yeah. And just finally on the game itself, Carlton have been really efficient these past 2 weeks at scoring from the entries inside 50. You mentioned earlier about how they've brought in those smaller forwards, and it's really had a strong impact on their ability to score when they have gone inside 50. So I guess outside of denying them quick exits from contests, which we've seen in the past has really hurt us, what are our best matchups to deny the Blues easy looks at goal?
Yeah, I don't think it's so much a matchup thing, mate. I think we just have to really go to work on not letting them get those easy centre clearance scores. They've averaged nearly 5 shots a game from centre bounces, in the last few weeks, and that's 5 times they're getting easy looks under 6-6-6 conditions. And I don't think at times there's a whole lot that defenders can do to prevent that if the opposition's getting easy ball. And it sounds simple, it won't be, and they're really good at it. But I think we just have to find ways to limit the damage there. But beyond that, I would really just like to see us resettle that back six with Mackay and Reid back there. Let Ben play on his brother. Reid gets a match up there where he can get off and intercept a little bit as well, and then Redmond playing the third tall, and then just support them through a real manic level of pressure by bringing in some extra running players so that when they have the footy, they're not getting it their own way and able to hit up forwards with ease.
Yeah. Well, moving on to the final thought, and this sort of goes back to what we started the show with, and we saw Dean Solomon apply some changes in his first game against West Coast. I guess what's the next evolution that you want to see this week?
Yeah, there's not a team in the AFL at the moment that's sort of in the top 6 or 7, and even beyond that, probably in the top 10 that isn't playing without 3, 4 or more small running forwards that can either hit the scoreboard through ground ball or apply pressure or get up the ground and provide, post clearance contest and also link up play. So let's evolve that by just bringing in more leg speed and ground ball winners. We probably don't have the options we'd like on our list just at the moment. We know Kako's still a number of weeks away from injury. He'd be one part of the puzzle, but just play what we do have and see how they go and see how the team goes by playing a more balanced side. At the moment, by going so tall, we're so reliant on being able to maintain possession through kick mark and taking marks inside 50. But under pressure, that can be hard to do. And when the game really heats up, you need players that can contribute when the ball's on the ground and the ball's in dispute. And we just haven't had the balance of team to be able to do that on the park with the way we've gone about it. So yeah, I really hope that Solly's watching the trends in the game. I'm sure he is, and I'm sure he understands it, and we start to see that at selection. And yeah, we play some additional smalls finally.
Yeah. Well, look, that will do us for this week. Never a dull moment putting this podcast together. Thanks to everyone, as always, for your support, whether you're a listener or you're watching on YouTube or you're a patron. Again, thanks for taking your time to spend some time with us. We really do appreciate it. This is actually the first Melbourne-based game I'm going to miss for quite a while. I'm actually going away with the family for the long weekend, so I will be cheering on from afar. Thanks for all your efforts this week, Jono. Any final words from you?
Yeah, look, never a dull moment might be our next line of merchandise, mate. It's a line that comes up a lot. I think the other popular one in the Patreon at the moment is "If you don't laugh, you cry." So maybe those two might make their way onto Don the Stat t-shirts pretty soon. But enjoy the break with the family, mate. I hope you guys have a great time and well deserved, and you get a chance to put your feet up and the weather's pretty kind to you. Just want to give a shout out to my nephew Wilbur. It was Cooper last week who was crook. He's passed it on to his younger brother. The bug's spreading through the house, but yeah, hopefully Wilbur's fit to play footy on Sunday. I think he's up to 20 goals already this season in sort of 5 games or so. So yeah, he's playing really good footy at the moment for the Cats. And yeah, hopefully he's fit to play and add to that tally. And yeah, really looking forward to getting to the G on Sunday. I know a host of Dean Solomon's former teammates will be there to support him and the team. So yeah, hopefully plenty of the Bomber faithful get along and do the same.
That's it. Get to the G if you can. That'll do us for this evening. As always, stay safe, everyone, and go Dons.